Thank you for joining me for this Rune reading 2026, focused on the United Kingdom. This is focused on the general situation. I have done a separate video concerning the political situation. Now, looking at the dominant trends and themes here, you can see that in the centre we have Hagley, which is always about difficulty to some extent. However, it hasn't fallen in its most challenging position when it looks like an H laying on its side. So there is something to be grateful for here. But looking at this reading in the way that the runes have fallen, they are very much heading in different directions. And starting with the rune on the left, Manes, Martha, that is about mankind, humanity, the human family. And it does remind us of how we need to have respect and care for one another. It also reminds us how we are one human family, and we have our own societies, a town, a village, a larger area. They're all little segments of the human family, aren't they, in relationship with the wider human family. So to see Martha in this position, it does remind us that we need to develop or a higher regard for other people, particularly for other people that think differently to us. And rather than thinking it is my way or the highway, there is certainly a need here to think in terms of what can we agree upon, what can we agree to differ upon, and where can compromise exist. And I'm talking about this in everyday relationships, in our friendships, in our social contacts, to try to think of others in a more kindly way. Because we are often, aren't we, at the moment, coming from a place of, in a way, I suppose, fear of loss or fear of not being heard. And it is entirely understandable that people feel like that. But we should remind ourselves sometimes that to be heard, we also need to be a listener, because it is the other side of the coin from being heard. So we need to think how we can listen differently. That doesn't mean that we have to agree with everybody, far from it, but maybe to think in terms of how can we be both bold and strong and disagree with greater kindness, greater respect for the views of the other person. That is highlighted, I think, very much by Manas, but also how, in the general scheme of things, human needs and human issues are very, very high on the agenda, as they should be. But at the same time, this rune also heralds the need to handle that with a degree of humility and with kindness as well as strength. Now, to come to the rune on the right, North or Night Bis, it's about North. It has a strong relationship with the word necessary. Another name for this rune is Nade, and Nade has a relationship with the English word need. So however we think about it, this is talking about hardship. It is talking about need. It is talking about what is lacking. And there is, I feel, more consciousness of what is lacking, more consciousness of what needs to change, which is obviously a good thing within the United Kingdom. But at the same time, it cannot be a good thing that that lack is there. And again, there is a relationship here with the rune on the left and human need, that people are not just cogs in a machine with things needing to be fixed mechanically. We can be more creative than that. We are more wonderful than that. And there is much that we need to focus on when it comes to human values and the question of what do we want those human values to be. Because there's a lot of going in different directions in this reading, a lot of polarity that is quite strong in its separation. Polarity is always about separation, but there is still this need to think in terms of how can we work together, because the United Kingdom, yes, it's made up of different countries, but at the same time, it is a kingdom, and there is a need to work together, even though there are certain areas where power can be devolved in a different way. But there is this is, I feel, the big theme that is there in 2026, the problem of working together and how we do that. The problem of being kinder to one another whilst still retaining a voice. The problem of being heard and of being listened to. And I know that as an individual, we can all make certain choices. We can make the choice to listen more. We can make the choice to hear more. And we can make the choice to be more aware and more thoughtful about what it is that we are hearing, rather than responding in fast ways. Because I feel it is that quick response, that immediate response, that doesn't consider the wider angles, that is going to be part of the problem in 2026. One of the things that Hagalaz represents is a hailstorm, as well as, of course, problems that we cannot exactly step around. When Hagalaz is present, there are always things that have to be addressed, and not just in terms of how we think about them and how we feel about them. Yes, the events highlighted by Hagalaz may well stir up emotions, they usually do, but it's never just about changing the emotions to get the benefit of Hagalaz and what it stirs up. It is about learning ways to address that, finding ways to deal with it, and indeed the kind of events that Hagalaz highlights, those events, they usually give us no choice but to respond in some way. But there is, whilst on occasions a fast response may be necessary, at the same time, there is the need for considered action whenever possible. And where there is a fast response in the initial phase, then for careful consideration to become part of the picture. That is shown very strongly here. But we should work on retaining our own confidence as well, because otherwise that will take a knock in 2026. So focusing on our self-worth, our worth as people, the love that we can give, the love that we can receive, looking out for our fellow citizens, those in our communities, those in the wider community. These are all highlighted as important trends, that we can make more of if we so desire in 2026. And if you are interested, I do offer personal readings, either rune readings or mediumship readings, which are for evidence of survival and communication with those who have gone into the spirit world, your friends and your loved ones, who come to bring messages that identify them, that give encouragement, share memories, share their humour, and share love. And if you would like to pursue a personal reading, the details of the readings that I offer can be found on my website, K Cook Spirit Wings, along with my contact details. Thank you for joining me, and I wish you a happy 2026.